So now I get to do where I really started, and I'm like most faculty. Most faculty see patients and do research.
This is the James Cancer-Free World podcast. I'm Steve Wartenberg, and my guest is Dr. Peter Shields. Peter is a medical oncologist, and he specializes in treating patients with lung cancer. He is also, or he was until recently, the deputy director of the Ohio State Comprehensive Cancer Center, and in this role he oversaw the research of a team of 270 world-class cancer researchers. However, Peter recently stepped down from this leadership position, but he is definitely not retiring. In his next chapter of his successful and impactful career, he will devote his time as an emeritus professor to patient care and research and clinical trials. And I also just learned about a new, exciting, different thing he's going to do, which he'll tell us about. So when I heard Peter's news, I thought I needed to have him on the podcast again as a thank you for all the great work he's done over the years. And I also thought this was a great opportunity to learn about how the Comprehensive Cancer Center has grown over the past decade or more and become a world leader in cancer research and some of the new exciting developments and breakthroughs that are next. So welcome back to the podcast, Peter.
Thanks for having me.
So it's great to have you back again. And I just got a hold of a press release, a couple of your other accomplishments that are pretty impressive. You've, over the years, have been authored 260 publications, more than. You have brought in through research grants more than $52 million.
To Ohio State.
To Ohio State. Oh, that's true, because you were at other institutions and brought in millions more there.
Correct.
So that's really amazing. That's a lot of research. You were the co-lead in the Beating Lung Cancer in Ohio initiative from Pelotonia, and you have raised for Pelotonia more than $90,000 and ridden it every year.
Correct.
Every year, wow.
Well, every year since I've been here. So it started a couple of years
You
earlier.
Started here in 2011.
Correct.
And so it's always interesting. You've had just an amazing career, but it's certainly not ending. But I thought this was a great chance to get a sense of, over the years, when you started as a lung cancer specialist, what was it like, briefly, and sort of walk us through some of the changes? Because you were part of a lot of the breakthroughs through research, through patient treatment in lung cancer as a specialist, but also as the deputy director here, you got to oversee research in everything, immunotherapy, all kinds of new things. So this is an impossible task, but briefly summarize 40 years of cancer advances.
Well, that's actually pretty easy to do.
Oh, good.
Because 40 years ago, we had a handful of drugs. Over until 10 years ago, every now and then a new drug would happen. We would fight at national meetings, international meetings, whether this drug that improved survival from 1 year to, from 12 months to 13 months was considered a breakthrough or not.
Right.
And every day is precious, but that was not really felt like we were making breakthroughs. Then, there were some targeted therapies, a lot of good work in breast cancer over the many years. But lung cancer, until, in the 90s, early 2000s, some targeted therapies were being developed for a small number of lung cancer patients. And then what's really changed things, at least in the solid tumor world, is the immunotherapies. I mean, huge, where almost every cancer is impacted now. Cancer care is very complicated. I frequently tell my patients I specialize only in lung cancer. I don't think I'm smart enough to be in private practice. These guys, women are out there, in a single day, they're doing lung cancer, breast cancer, prostate cancer, leukemia, and so on and so on. And all of cancer care, almost all of cancer care has gotten so much better and so much nuanced with so many choices of drugs that we here at the James, we're all these super specialists. And I don't think if I wanted to leave here and go into private practice, I could do that.
Well, you'd have to go into private practice as a lung cancer specialist.
Yeah, and that's in private practice, that's not a viable model.
But that's the whole concept of a comprehensive cancer center / cancer hospital that we have here, is that you have the super specialists.
For most comprehensive cancer centers, that's the case. They have to be a certain size, like Ohio State. Like some of the smaller ones will have people for sure specializing, but maybe not in just one cancer by itself. Here, we're a pretty large institution, so we have, teams. I mean, there's 8 lung medical oncologists alone, so.
So you came here in 2011 from Georgetown, right?
Correct.
What brought you here? What made you decide to do this change in careers, and what opportunity did you see here for yourself?
It was really the job, for sure. Nice place to raise a family, but the job was what was really enticing. I mean, at that point, the institution was clearly on an upswing. Pelotonia back then was raising $4 million, $7 million. Who knew we would get to now? But that was considered, to me, a strong sign of community support, and if the community was supporting the institution that way, then there must be something good here, because they would know about it. And so, I was at the National Cancer Institute for about 13 years, Georgetown for about 10 or 11 years, and so I always thought it was a good idea to go to a new institution and refresh. But Georgetown was also, it's a great institution, was also getting kind of small. So that was a time where I said, you know what, I'm interested in moving. And the Ohio State opportunity, came up under Mike Caligiuri, and being, recruited by other great people here, Electra Pesquet and Clara Bloomfield and others, John Bird. And I was like, yeah, felt right. Didn't even really negotiate much, didn't look around, just said this was the move to do.
Well, that was like a hall of fame of people you just mentioned there.
Yeah, and more. I'm afraid. Yeah. I'm always afraid to mention names, because there are some that I would forget, and I don't want to insult them.
But you came here as the deputy director of
Correct.
the Comprehensive Cancer Center. So just to make sure people understand what that means, give us a quick understanding of what a comprehensive cancer center is. And in addition to that, you're going to see patients. So you have the whole gamut.
Well, it was interesting. I'll answer your question about what is a comprehensive cancer center in a second. But when I first took that call from Mike Caligiuri, who knows how to recruit, has all the charm, brilliant guy.
Just so people know, he was the head of the Comprehensive Cancer Center and the James Hospital back in 2011.
Correct. And what he said to me, which was really intriguing, was, you're going to have a big job, but we as senior leaders have to be role models. So you're not coming here to wind down your research. You're not coming here to wind down your mentoring or any of your activities, because you have to show people what it's like to be a true scientific leader.
By example.
And I was like, that doesn't sound possible. He said, we'll make sure you have the administrative support that you can do everything you need to do and still help set scientific vision, build infrastructure, connect the dots, so I can explain sort of what my job looks like. But a comprehensive cancer center is a designation from the National Cancer Institute. There's a bunch, but less than one in every state. Every state.
There's like 70 some, right?
Well, comprehensives are somewhere in the 50s.
50s, okay.
There's non-comprehensive centers as well. And so to get that designation from the cancer center, you have to write this massive, thousands of page grant, explain how you are organizing research at your institution in ways that wouldn't make the accomplishments if you weren't here. So you could have cancer research, but the NCI is looking for those catalysts to make the work better, breaking down institutional barriers. Interestingly, it's a grant, but you only compete against yourself. Every time you go in, it's got to be better. Otherwise, you're not building in ways that might have happened if there wasn't a comprehensive cancer center. So it's a review that looks at both numbers as well as impact. So it looks at, is your grant dollars up, and how many people have you recruited, and and how many papers have you published, and how many patients you put on trial, and that's all really important. But it's really a grant of stories. We had this vision, we got these 3 people together, we then recruited these other 3 people, they turned that into some paper or drug, that got FDA approval. And so it's really, are you making an impact for the community in the state of Ohio, as well as, internationally.
Wow, and then the word comprehensive means you need to cover all areas of cancer research.
So there's 3 general areas. There's clinical, sciences, clinical trials. There's population sciences, so cancer control, cancer survivorship, cancer prevention. And then basic science. How do you fuel the discovery so the population scientists and the clinical trialists can make the difference in the world?
Now, you said you weren't smart enough to be a general physician and know every parts of the body, which is a little bit of modesty. But as deputy director of the Comprehensive Cancer Center, you needed to know a little bit or more about what everyone was doing here.
So my job is to sort of be that catalyst, that enabler to recognize what's the next thing, what's the next 10 steps. And so it's not me, but it's knowing when someone explains something to me to say, you know what, that's a direction we need to go. So it's pulling people's ideas together. A lot of times there's an idea out there, and I'll pull a bunch of people in the room, and some people have said this is not a nice analogy because I'm going to use a used car salesman approach. But used car salesmen are perfectly nice, and they're not crooks.
They get a bad rap.
But you get a bunch of people in the room. They know they're looking for something, selling something that they want, and have them drive off really happy. And so that's the same thing as like foster those collaborations, establish the feasibility. Don't ask people to do stuff that you know that they won't be able to get done. We're all pretty busy. And then create something that's more, and that's from smaller projects of just 2 people with grants where we figure out, hey, we need to buy this instrument to help them get this done, to very large projects like the Pelotonia Institute of Immuno-Oncology.
So it's also, as you were saying that, when you say small projects, I'll bet it's connecting 2 or 3 groups doing small projects. You see the link between them, combine them, and those 3 small projects lead to something bigger.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. But in the last year or so, we've had a couple of people who've gotten grants in chemotherapy complications, neuropathies, brain issues, peripheral neuropathies, chemo brain, that sort of thing. And I realized we had 2 or 3 people here, and then by coincidence we were recruiting 3 other people in different colleges with very different disciplines, from nursing to basic science to neurology. And I was like, wait a minute, you guys need to start meeting on a monthly basis and then bring in other people. And that's one of the fun things about my job, is just knowing how to connect dots and what's the feasibility for research, and quite frankly, figure out who to invest in.
Wow. So if you could, what are a couple of the bigger, I don't know if projects is the right word, but what are some of the bigger things over the past dozen or so years that you've been the deputy director that the Comprehensive Cancer Center has developed?
I won't take credit for these, but I was on the ground floor pulling this together. So, the Pelotonia Institute of Immuno-Oncology, that success is all Dr. Zihai Lee. But he and I really figured out the structure that would work at Ohio State, and what are the scientific priorities that would work at Ohio State, and how to really push the envelope and mentor him, not that he really needs mentoring, on how to be successful here at Ohio State. And I mean that in a very positive way. We have a strong research culture, but every institution is different. And you just can't walk in or ride in on your horse and say, hey, I'm going to fix everything.
But it was recognizing at the right time that immunotherapy was vital, and creating an institute that was going to do that.
Yeah, this was a vision that certainly started, and it wasn't only mine, but it was a vision that started before Dr. Lee was recruited. And what's important is, I'll correct you, that it wasn't only about immunotherapy. That was one of the things I really pushed. It was that's why we call it the Institute of Immuno-Oncology, because that includes prevention, it includes survivorship, it includes side effects. It's not just using drugs to treat cancer. And I was very conscious about making sure that we don't narrow that down, because the power of the immune system is affecting everything from cancer development to the complications of the drugs we treat to survivorship. It's huge. And so I wanted to make sure that we didn't get into that box where a lot of other institutions are in that box.
So the Pelotonia Institute of Immuno-Oncology is one big thing that's been developed. What's another?
Well, the Center for Tobacco Research. When I got here, I was an active tobacco researcher. And there was a lot of people here who were pretty good, who, quite frankly, I only knew them from meetings. I really never worked with them. And an opportunity came out for a large grant from the FDA and the National Cancer Institute. And we pulled together. I never worked with these people before, but Mary Ellen Weavers, Amy Furkatich, Ellen Peters, who was here at the time. We pulled this grant together, not really knowing each other. They all knew each other well. But like, who is this guy coming in?
Guy.
Like the great savior, you know? And who's this deputy director who thinks he's so smart and that sort of thing? Well, we got the grant, and that really started the catalyst. And then recognizing that we had the critical mass here, we said, well, let's build on that. And we recruited Ted Wagner as the vision to sort of enact this Center for Tobacco Research, and working closely with Ted. At this point now, I mean, I would argue that we have, one of the best tobacco research programs in the country, very large grants, lots of faculty that are very active, so that's another example.
Now, tobacco research, I've had a chance to talk to Ted and you a little bit about this. It's very interesting. It's about not just the impact of tobacco on people's lungs, it's about helping the federal government regulate them and prevent tobacco companies from putting out products that are going to be either more harmful or entice younger people to get hooked.
Well, so the FDA has fairly broad authority, and what developed since 2009, when the FDA got the authority to regulate tobacco, believe it or not, they were prevented from the FDA law in the 1950s from touching tobacco. So Congress had to pass a law changing the FDA's authority. So that happens in 2009. A lot of focus, a lot of research dollars on how they help the FDA in prevention, reduction of risk, reducing marketing that's having an adverse impact on people to use more tobacco products, how to foster quitting. And we really thought it was going to be the tobacco endgame. It was going to be well-funded from user fees from the tobacco industry, which is how FDA gets a lot of their funding. So pharmaceutical companies, when they put a drug on the market, they have user fees.
Got it.
This was going to be the larger than the drug division at the FDA. In retrospect, it's not been so good. The tobacco company and some others supported the FDA bill. That should have been a red flag that was going to be a problem. And what it's really done is, who knew government works slowly? We really can't count.
They did.
And the FDA hasn't really had that many accomplishments because a lot of it gets hung up not only in government but in courts.
Yeah.
And what it's really done is sustain tobacco use at its current level and leaving us to try to still chip away. It wasn't, the great changing the tobacco endgame, because in that law said certain things that the FDA couldn't ban nicotine entirely, couldn't ban cigarettes entirely, had a clause in there that if you're already selling products at a certain point in time, you can continue selling those products. So it kind of normalized and accepted that cigarette smoking is going to be part of our culture. Wow. So it's just as hard now to fight that. And in retrospect, we didn't know that. FDA is doing some really good stuff. I don't want to dump on it entirely, but it's really, compared to what we all thought, including the FDA, could happen, just hasn't happened.
But then a whole new thing happened, vaping.
Well, so that's part of the problem, is that FDA has spent more time catching up with an epidemic than they could really to address the smoking issue.
Wow.
And so that's kind of overwhelmed them too.
Well, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to hear more about what Peter's career has encompassed and what he's going to do next.
You didn't choose cancer, but you can choose where to treat it.
And when you choose the James at Ohio State,
you're picking a team of experts who understand there is no routine cancer.
You're opting for care from a highly specialized team dedicated to treating one type of cancer, yours.
A team that studies the unique makeup of your disease to develop a personalized treatment plan.
You're choosing our region's only comprehensive cancer center designated by the National Cancer Institute.
Where more than 1,700 scientists are working on new treatments and new hope for every form of cancer.
At the James, you're making the choice to have the most advanced treatments, many of which were developed
right here.
And you're choosing access to the James world-class clinical trials, dedicated support services, and an unmatched survivorship program to support your life after cancer treatment.
You didn't choose cancer, but the choice of where to treat it is clear.
We're back with Peter Shields, and one of the numbers that stuck out that I read earlier is you've been part of teams or the principal investigator that has been awarded $52 million in grants, which is a very hefty and important sum that's funded a lot of great research. How do you do that? What's sort of the secret that for you personally, and that you also help others when they apply for grants?
Throughout my career, I've been happy and fortunate and lucky enough, I guess that's redundant, to really work with great people at other institutions, at the same institution. Ohio State has this incredible, culture of collaboration and research. I would not have come here if I hadn't really looked under the hood deeply, because my research has always been very multidisciplinary. It involves collaborators in different colleges and other institutions, and if this was a siloed institution that was driven by, department chairs who say, mine, 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 or college deans who say mine, 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 I wouldn't have been here. And so, so I enjoy building those teams. And I've been really lucky, as I mentioned, the tobacco research area, great collaborators, but even things like the Beating Lung Cancer in Ohio, study. But
that was another Pelotonia.
That was another Pelotonia
statewide screening program.
Right, and now we've got dozens of publications, really important stuff with that on how to impact the quality of life, depression, stress in lung cancer patients. So it's kind of one grant at a time. I often say that we're professional communicators. If we don't get our research into journals, we got to communicate that, and we got to communicate our ideas to peer-reviewed grant systems to get your grants, and it's sort of one at a time, some big, some small. But it's really the infrastructure of the Comprehensive Cancer Center, the administrative support, the shared resources, where everyone here is just totally on mission, which is cancer focus.
Now, Pelotonia has come up a few times, and I know we're over $270 million that Pelotonia has raised for research here, and the idea was to use that money, some of it, to do the early research that could lead to successful bigger grants. Has that come about, and what has been your role in that?
Sure, but the money definitely goes to sort of ideas that we peer review, and we have a pretty high bar, and that bar is the research has to be good enough that you're willing to go back to your mother, your friend, your whomever, and say, hey, we're short $10. Would you swipe your card one more time for my ride? And so that's a pretty heavy bar. But it also goes for a lot of recruitment. I mean, we're really lucky to get this community support. We're really lucky to have the Pelotonia folks who now know how to harness that community support. And so, we invested a lot of dollars over especially the last 3 to 4 years, as those $25 million, except for the COVID year. And now that's really paying off. So what we're seeing is almost every day new grants, high impact publications. We recruited a phenomenal large number of junior faculty right out of their fellowships, who it's like almost every day it feels like they're getting their first RO1, which is the big deal grant. They're getting these big publications. They're getting invited to, international conferences. And so that investment, more so than the senior folks, but these junior folks are the next generation, to use that cliche, and they're working together, and it's just amazing to see how these people are just just taking advantage of the infrastructure to just get their work done.
So that's a great overview, and I'm sure you could go on for a long time, but I think it's important. What are you going to do next? You're going to still see patients and do research?
Well, so, that's what we all love. I've often said as deputy director I had the best job in the world because I was able to build and create and that sort of thing. But other people can do that and should do that. Research is fun. Sitting in those lab meetings, looking at those discoveries, getting a paper from someone. And I just found that, in the patient care too, I just found that I was doing everything as quickly as possible. I wasn't able to put the time in that I knew I needed to. So rather than working on that grant for 2 or 3 months, I'd do it in 2 weeks.
Okay.
And for a while, there was a badge of honor. Many people will say, oh, yeah, I did a grant over a weekend and I got funded. That's actually not so great. Maybe those people are that brilliant to do that. But really, these things take time. Mentoring takes time. And, so I realized that I didn't want to live in that fast lane anymore. Other people can do that. Other people thrive on it just the way I thrived on it. And so really just to be able to do the research and the clinical as well as I should be.
Clinical is seeing patients.
Seeing patients. I just said, well, I should just step down as the deputy director. And the cleanest way to do that, quite frankly, was to officially retire from the institution. Got rehired the next day as a returning retiree with a lower level appointment. And so now it's great because, where I used to have hundreds of emails every day, now there's like 20 or 30, and I'm still wondering why I'm getting that many. I'm getting really good at unsubscribe, or letting people know that to not do that. But so now I get to do where I really started, and I'm like most faculty. Most faculty see patients and do research.
Wow, so it's almost like you're a 30-year-old doctor again.
Yeah.
But with all that experience and knowledge, and wow. But you're also doing something kind of different and unique.
Well, so I do have extra time. Some people...
Extra time.
Actually, it's not really. I haven't really just changed jobs.
I know. You're probably now... What are you now? You used to work 70 hours a week. Now you're working 50?
Well, I was hoping to bring it down to 45, 50. I'm still at 70, but that's because I'm actually enrolled in an accelerated but full-time paramedic program.
Paramedic program.
Right.
Riding in ambulances.
Correct. And so I'm... so some guys retire to go fly fishing or play golf or travel. And I had this passion in medical school and undergraduate where I was riding ambulances as an EMT. So this is a different type of patient care. I'm able to go where they really need it, in their homes, in their car wreck, in their office, when they fall on the street coming out of a supermarket, whether it's serious.
Hands-on medicine.
It's hands-on medicine, and it's, we have a scope of practice with limited protocols compared to what a physician can do, but it's totally different because it's messy. When you show up, you don't know what the person's going to say.
Right.
It's not like, you've got a medical history already. You've got medical records. You've got nurses seeing them and medical assistants, and there's a track record when you get to see them in your clinical environment, which quite frankly is fairly sterile. White coats, urine control. When you're a paramedic, you don't know what's going to come at you from either side, and that's very exciting, but that's where people need it. But, it goes back to when I was in D.C., I was very active in the community as well, just in a very different ways. I'm very proud that I was able to principally develop a free medical clinic that was for Central Americans. So I had a Central American partner, a great leader, who's now back in El Salvador. And we built that. It's now a federally qualified health center that we started with a Tuesday night clinic that was totally free.
Wow.
Another breast cancer screening clinic. So I've always wanted to do community support. I really enjoy being able to give that way.
And now you will again.
In a very different way. People have said to me, you're a doctor, why would you want to be a paramedic? Including some paramedics. And I've explained to them what I just said to you. It's a different type of medical care. As a doctor, you can see lots of patients per hour in a clinic day. In an ambulance, it could be one patient that could take 2 hours, but that's what's needed.
I feel like you might like a good challenge.
And that's
learning and then doing this paramedic. It's
kind of intimidating knowing that, once I'm licensed, I'll be working with other paramedics who have more paramedic experience.
Yeah.
But, when you're in control there, it's not like you have your great oncology pharmacist and your oncology nurses and the nurse practitioners. It's, you and a couple of other people.
And that's another thing. As you're of retirement age, you not just only do you want to keep busy, but you want to do something meaningful. And this keeps you young. You're learning new things and doing something important and active and out in the community.
Yeah, I feel like I'm in pretty good shape, but this is just another reason to stay in pretty good shape and keep one mentally smart. I mean, I don't see myself, slowing down in any time soon. But for as long as I do this, as many people I can take care of, that's great.
Well, excellent. Thank you. This was great. I learned a lot, and I'm just fascinated and inspired by your new career as a paramedic. I think that's kind of amazing.
Yeah, thanks. I'm really looking forward to it. Started the ride, so I didn't freak out. It's all good.
Okay. Well, congratulations and good luck in the next chapter of your life.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
This podcast is brought to you by the Ohio State University Comprehensive Cancer Center, Arthur G. James Cancer Hospital, and Richard J. Solove Research Institute. For more information, check out our website, cancer.osu.edu.